The night air still carried laughter when Emma stepped out of her car and closed the door behind her. The faint sound of music from the birthday party she'd just left still echoed in her mind, a gentle reminder of the world she rarely entered anymore. Her friend's home had been filled with warm lights, chatter, and the easy joy of people who had time to celebrate. Emma had smiled, nodded, even laughed at the right moments. But beneath every smile, there had been a quiet ache she didn't show anyone. The porch light flickered softly as she walked up the steps to her small house. The sky above her was clear, a calm navy blue sprinkled with stars. Inside, only a single lamp glowed in the living room, painting the walls with a golden hush. It was exactly how she liked it, peaceful, predictable. Hers. Emma slipped off her shoes and stood still for a moment, listening to the stillness. It was the kind of silence that could either comfort you or remind you of everything you'd lost. For her, it often did both. Her son Noah was 16 now, old enough to understand more than she wished he did. He had grown up fast, maybe too fast, after the separation 2 years ago. Since then, Emma had tried to build a life that looked steady from the outside. A job at the local library, simple dinners, a home that stayed clean even when her heart didn't. But some nights, like this one, when she came home from seeing other people's laughter, the quiet felt like a secret she couldn't carry much longer. She placed her small purse on the counter, still wearing her soft blue dress, the one her friend Lily had insisted she wear. "You look lovely in that color," Lily had said earlier that evening. Emma had smiled politely, brushing off the compliment, though for a fleeting second she looked in the mirror and almost believed it. Now, standing under her own dim kitchen light, she didn't feel lovely. She just felt alone. She turned on the kettle and waited for it to whistle. The rhythm of it calmed her. There was something soothing about small routines. Tea before bed, folding a blanket neatly, writing a short list of things to do in the morning. These things gave her day shape even when her emotions didn't. As the water boiled, Emma's thoughts drifted. She thought about how everyone at the party had been talking about new beginnings, promotions, travels, weddings. People her age spoke with a kind of pride, like they had everything figured out. She had smiled through the conversations, sipping her sparkling water, pretending not to notice the way couples leaned toward each other, or the way old friends laughed about things she couldn't relate to anymore. She loved her friends. She was happy for them. But there was a small part of her, the part that sat quietly behind her practiced smiles, that wished she could feel that kind of warmth again. Not from a person, necessarily, but from life itself. Sometimes, late at night, she'd catch herself dreaming about places she'd never been. She imagined driving through mountain roads in autumn, staying in a tiny cabin where no one knew her name, or walking through an art gallery in another city, surrounded by strangers who didn't see her as someone's mother or someone's ex-wife. Just as Emma. She always shook those thoughts away. They felt too selfish, too out of reach. But they lived somewhere deep inside her, waiting. The whistle of the kettle broke her thoughts. She poured the water into her favorite mug, a simple white one with a small crack along the rim, and sat by the window. The house across the street was still bright, filled with the movement of a family getting ready for bed. She smiled faintly, watching the light flick off room by room, until only the porch light remained. Her own porch light had been flickering for months. She told herself she'd replace it someday. That's when she heard soft footsteps from the hallway. Noah. She turned, surprised to see him awake. His brown hair was tousled, and he wore an old sweatshirt that used to belong to his father. "Hey, sweetheart," she said gently. "You're still up?" He nodded, rubbing his eyes. "Couldn't sleep. I heard the car." She smiled, trying to sound cheerful. The party was nice. Just the usual cake, candles, everyone pretending to still be 30. He gave a small laugh and sat down across from her. There was something different about his expression. Quieter, thoughtful. "Mum," he said after a pause. "Can I ask you something?" Emma looked at him curiously, her hands wrapped around her mug. "Of course." "What is it?" He hesitated. The silence between them stretched for a few seconds, soft but heavy. "Maybe not tonight," he said finally, almost whispering. "You look tired." She studied him for a moment. There was kindness in his eyes, and something else. Something she couldn't name yet. "All right," she said with a gentle smile. "Tomorrow then." He nodded, got up, and disappeared down the hallway. Emma sat still, her tea growing cold. For a reason she couldn't explain, her heart beat just a little faster. Something in Noah's tone lingered in her chest, a quiet knowing, a feeling that the conversation they didn't have tonight would be the one she'd remember for the rest of her life. Outside, the stars seemed brighter than before. Inside, the house stayed the same, except for a single, almost invisible change. The air carried the promise that something was about to shift. That night, after Noah went back to his room, Emma stayed by the window for a long time. The clock ticked softly, and the faint hum of the refrigerator filled the quiet. She wrapped her cardigan around her shoulders and looked out at the street, where the street lamps painted the road in pale gold. Her thoughts drifted back, not to the birthday party, but to a time long before that. A time when she used to laugh without worrying who might hear. A time when life felt open, and love felt like something she could trust. It began many years ago, when she worked at a small local bookstore by the lake. She was 25 then, new to the town, unsure of herself, but quietly hopeful about the future. The bookstore smelled of paper and rain, with old wooden shelves that creaked when you walked. People would wander in on rainy afternoons, looking for warmth as much as for books. That's where she met Daniel. He wasn't the kind of man who stood out right away. He had a calm way about him, the kind of presence that made the air feel a little steadier. He came in one afternoon with a half-wet jacket and an apologetic smile. "Do you have anything by Mark Twain?" he'd asked, his voice gentle. She'd shown him the section herself, brushing past the scent of rain that followed him. "Thanks," he said. "I'm trying to get my nephew to read something that isn't about superheroes." Emma laughed softly. "Good luck with that. Twain's a big leap from capes and lasers." He smiled, a real one this time, and that was how it started. Over the next few weeks, he came back often. Sometimes for books, sometimes for no reason at all. Their conversations were always small, about authors, about coffee, about how the weather never seemed to decide what it wanted to be. Yet, those talks filled the quiet corners of her day. There was nothing dramatic, nothing rushed. Just warmth. She remembered how one evening, when the sun set pink and orange through the front windows, he'd stood by the counter holding a novel he hadn't even opened. "You ever think about how stories make people braver?" he'd asked. Emma had looked up, surprised. "Braver?" He nodded. "Yeah. Sometimes you read about someone else taking a chance, and it makes you want to take one too." She'd smiled, though her heart had suddenly felt full. She didn't say it then, but she thought about that sentence for years afterward. Life, as it does, carried them in different directions. Daniel was offered a job in another city, and Emma, cautious, practical, afraid of what distance might bring, never said the words she wanted to. He left quietly, promising to stay in touch. For a while they did. Letters, occasional calls. A postcard once, with a photograph of a lighthouse and the words, "This place reminds me of you." Steady, bright, But as months became years, the messages grew fewer until one day they simply stopped. Emma never blamed him. She told herself that life had simply taken its turn. People move, hearts change, seasons end. But sometimes, when the world grew too quiet, she found herself wondering what might have been, if she'd said something, if she'd taken that chance. When she eventually met David, the man who became her husband and Noah's father, she thought she had found her story's next chapter. David was kind in his own way, ambitious, driven. Their life together was steady, but not soft. Somewhere along the way, between work and responsibilities, the laughter faded. After the separation, Emma sometimes thought back to Daniel not with regret, but with a gentle ache, the kind of longing that doesn't ask for return. Only remembrance. She never told anyone about him. He existed in her heart like a song she once knew by heart, but hadn't sung in years. A soft creak from upstairs brought her back to the present. She could hear Noah moving around in his room, probably searching for something he'd forgotten to finish. She smiled faintly. In that quiet moment, Emma realized how much time had passed, how many versions of herself she'd lived through. The young woman in the bookstore, the wife trying to keep her family together, the mother learning to smile again after heartbreak. And yet, somewhere deep inside, that same gentle longing still lived, not for a person anymore, but for the feeling she once had when the world felt wide open. She took a slow breath and whispered into the empty room, "I wonder if he ever thinks of that bookstore." The words hung softly in the air, fading into the night. Emma looked around the house. The framed photos, the neat shelves, the lamp that glowed like a quiet promise. She wasn't sad, not exactly. Just aware that life had carried her far from where she began. But maybe, just maybe, the story wasn't over yet. She reached over to turn off the lamp. The living room fell into a warm half-darkness, and for a moment, it almost felt like that old bookstore again. Quiet, still, waiting for the next page to turn. And upstairs, in the hush of the house, her son, the only person who truly saw her, was about to ask the question that would awaken everything she thought she had left behind. The next morning began quietly, with sunlight filtering through the thin curtains, and the faint smell of toast drifting from the kitchen. Emma's world moved in small, steady rhythms: coffee brewing, Noah leaving for school, the sound of the door clicking softly behind him. She liked mornings like this. They gave her a sense of control, a way to organize her thoughts before the world could interrupt them. After finishing her cup of coffee, she gathered her tote bag and left for work at the library. The sky was clear, the air crisp, one of those late spring mornings that carried the scent of new beginnings. The library sat near the old town square, a quiet brick building surrounded by tall maple trees. Emma loved its silence, the comfort of soft pages and whispered voices. It was her world, predictable, calm, and safe. But that day, fate decided to shake the dust off the past. It happened just before noon. She was shelving a new collection of novels when she heard a familiar voice at the front desk. Calm, low, steady. The sound caught her off guard, like hearing an old melody she hadn't thought of in years. "Excuse me, do you still keep the local history section near the windows?" The voice asked. Emma froze for half a second, her hand still resting on the spine of a book. Then she turned. There he was. Daniel. He looked older, not in a sad way, but in the way time softens people. His hair was grayer at the temples, his face lined gently by the years, but his eyes, they were the same. Kind, observant, quietly curious. "Daniel?" she said softly, the name slipping out before she could stop it. He turned toward her, surprise flashing across his face. Then a smile, slow and warm. "Emma," he said, as if saying her name brought back 1,000 unspoken memories at once. For a moment, neither of them moved. The world seemed to shrink around that small corner of the library. Just them, surrounded by rows of silent books and sunlight falling through the windows. Finally, he spoke. "I can't believe it's really you." Emma smiled, her voice a little unsteady. "It's been a long time. 15 years, he said after a moment. "Maybe more." She nodded. "I still remember the bookstore." You laughed quietly. And the rain. That broke the tension between them. A gentle laugh that carried warmth, not awkwardness. Emma gestured toward the seating area by the window. "I was about to take a break. Would you like some coffee?" "I'd love that," he said. They sat by the window, the same kind of light spilling in as it once had in the old bookstore. The town outside looked peaceful, a few people walking dogs, a man sweeping the sidewalk, the world moving at its slow, forgiving pace. "I didn't know you were still here," Daniel said. "Didn't think I would be," she replied with a faint smile. "But somehow, this place became home." He nodded thoughtfully. "I came back last month. My sister's been unwell, and I wanted to be closer to her." Funny how life brings you back to the places you once left. There was no regret in his tone, just quiet acceptance. They spoke about ordinary things. How the town had changed. The small cafe that had closed. The new art fair by the lake. But beneath every word was something neither of them said. The awareness that they were both older now, both carrying lives filled with stories untold. Emma watched him as he spoke. He still had that calm way of listening, the same focus, the same warmth. And though she didn't say it aloud, a strange comfort began to bloom in her chest. Soft and steady. At one point, Daniel paused. "You know," he said, smiling slightly, "I still have that postcard you sent me years ago. The one with the ocean view. It's a little faded now, but I kept it." Emma blinked, surprised. "You did?" He nodded. "It reminded me of how some people come into your life quietly, and somehow never leave, even when they're gone." Her throat tightened, not from sadness, but from the simple weight of what those words meant. "I used to wonder if I'd ever see you again," she said softly. "Guess we both got our answer," he replied. Smiling gently, they sat in silence for a while, watching the light shift across the floor. Nothing about the moment was grand or romantic. It was something quieter, deeper. Two people meeting again after life had already taught them everything about distance, patience and time. When Daniel finally stood to leave, he looked at her the same way he had all those years ago, with kindness, not longing. "I'm glad I found this library," he said. "And you?" Emma smiled, her heart warm and strangely light. "So am I." He hesitated for a moment, then added, "Maybe we'll see each other again." "Maybe," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He left with that same calm stride, the sound of the door closing softly behind him. When the library grew quiet again, Emma sat for a long while at the table, staring at the empty seat across from her. She wasn't lost in the past, not anymore. Instead, she felt something gentle awaken in her, a reminder that life can circle back in the softest ways. Outside, the maple leaves swayed in the wind, and the sunlight touched everything with gold. Emma closed her eyes and smiled, not with regret, but with peace. The past hadn't returned to haunt her. It had simply come back to remind her that even the quietest hearts can find connection again. Not through love rekindled, but through understanding, forgiveness, and grace. The next evening unfolded softly, like the quiet after rain. The air outside was cool, filled with the scent of lilac from the small bush near the porch. Inside, the house was peaceful. Noah was in his room, and Emma was in the kitchen, tidying up after dinner. Yet beneath that calm rhythm, her heart carried a different kind of stillness, the kind that comes when something inside you begins to change. Ever since she saw Daniel at the library, her thoughts had felt lighter, though she couldn't explain why. Seeing him again hadn't reopened old wounds. Instead, it had reminded her how far she'd come, how much she'd grown, how much she'd survived. She'd spent years keeping her emotions carefully folded away, believing that strength meant silence. But the truth was, silence had only made her forget who she was. Now, she wanted to speak again, not to Daniel, not even about the past, but to the person who mattered most. Noah. When he came into the kitchen that night. She was sitting at the table, lost in thought. He looked at her curiously. "You okay, Mom? You've been quiet since yesterday." She smiled faintly. "I'm fine. Just thinking." He poured himself a glass of water and leaned against the counter. "About what?" Emma hesitated, then took a deep breath. "About how life doesn't always turn out the way we plan. And how sometimes, even when we think we're done feeling certain things, something reminds us we're still human." Noah frowned a little, unsure where she was going. "You mean, like memories?" "Exactly," she said softly. "Memories, people, moments. They have a way of coming back, not to hurt us, but to remind us who we were." He nodded slowly, watching her with the same quiet patience he'd always had. After a moment, she added, "Do you remember the other night, when you said I didn't have to pretend everything was fine?" Noah smiled faintly. "Yeah, I thought you might be mad about that." Emma shook her head. "No, sweetheart. You were right. I've been trying so hard to be strong that I forgot how to be honest, even with you." She paused, her voice trembling slightly. "You're growing up so fast, and I kept thinking it was my job to protect you from my sadness. But I think what you really needed was to see that it's okay to feel, that it's okay to start over." Noah said nothing for a long while. Then, quietly, he walked over and sat beside her. "I just want you to be happy, Mom," he said. "You always take care of me. I just want someone to take care of you too." The words landed softly but deeply. Emma smiled, her eyes glistening. "You already do, Noah. More than you know." For a moment they just sat there. No speeches, no noise, just understanding. Later that week, Emma returned to the library for her afternoon shift. The place was warm and bright, filled with the faint scent of old books. She found herself glancing toward the window seat where she and Daniel had talked, but he wasn't there. A part of her wondered if she'd see him again, and another part felt at peace, even if she did in single quotes around lunchtime. A familiar envelope arrived at the front desk. It had no return address, only her name in careful handwriting. Inside was a short note and a small photograph. "Emma, it was good seeing you again. Truly. Our paths crossed once when life was beginning, and again now, when life has settled. I think that's no accident. You reminded me that kindness and courage can exist quietly, in the same heart. Thank you for that. Daniel." The photograph was of the old bookstore by the lake, now closed but still standing. Sunlight glowed softly through the dusty windows. Emma smiled. She didn't cry. She simply folded the note, placed it gently in her drawer, and felt something calm settle inside her. It wasn't longing. It was gratitude. That evening, she and Noah sat outside on the porch. The sunset painted the sky in gold and rose, and a faint breeze stirred the leaves. "You ever think about what's next?" Noah asked, breaking the silence. Emma looked at him, her expression tender. "Every day, but not in a worried way anymore. More like curiosity." He grinned. Like waiting for the next chapter? She nodded. Exactly like that. They watched the last of the light fade from the sky. And Emma thought of all the things she'd once hidden. Her quiet loneliness. Her buried hope. The memory of love she never spoke aloud. None of it felt heavy now. It all belonged to her story. The parts that hurt and the parts that healed. And when she finally spoke, her voice was soft, but steady. You know, Noah, sometimes the most important changes don't happen at big moments. Sometimes they happen on quiet nights, when someone simply tells you the truth you needed to hear. He looked at her, smiling knowingly. Like that night after the birthday party. Emma laughed gently, her heart full. Exactly like that. They sat together as the stars began to appear, mother and son, sharing the silence that no longer felt empty. And for the first time in a long while, Emma felt completely at peace. She didn't need to chase the past or fear the future. She was already where she needed to be, loved, understood, and finally, free.